The flight home had been smooth, the kind of trip where everything lined up just right. Ethan had finished his last meeting early, caught an earlier flight, and managed to avoid the usual delays. It was rare for business trips to end on such a perfect note, and the thought of surprising Lauren filled him with a warmth that had been missing in recent months. He pulled into the driveway just past 9 p.m., the house standing quiet and still against the glow of the streetlights. Something about it felt off. Maybe it was the absence of the usual signs of life, no television murmuring from the living room, no soft music playing from the kitchen, where Lauren usually unwound with a glass of wine. He chalked it up to the late hour. She was probably asleep. Rolling his suitcase behind him, he stepped inside, expecting the familiar comfort of home. Instead, the air felt different. Warmer, heavier, carrying a scent that didn't belong. His steps slowed as he took in the small, unsettling details. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the counter, 2 glasses next to it, lipstick faintly smudged on the rim of one. His stomach twisted, though he told himself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe a friend had come over. Maybe he was overthinking things. Then he caught it, that scent. Not Lauren's perfume, not the soft floral fragrance she always wore. This was something sharp, musky, undeniably masculine. The realization struck like a gut punch. His grip on the suitcase handle tightened. Moving with careful, deliberate steps, he made his way through the house. The furniture seemed subtly shifted, as though someone had carelessly leaned against it or moved around too comfortably. As he reached the staircase, he hesitated. The feeling in his gut grew heavier. That sinking, suffocating certainty that something was wrong. And then, from upstairs, a sound that made his blood run cold. A laugh. Soft, breathy, familiar. Lauren's laugh. But not the kind meant for him. His chest constricted, breath caught somewhere between rage and disbelief. He ascended the stairs slowly, forcing himself to move even as every part of him screamed to turn away. The hallway stretched long and quiet, the bedroom door slightly ajar, casting a sliver of dim light into the darkness. A whisper. A rustle of sheets. His hand reached out and pushed the door open. The scene hit him like a brick wall. Lauren, his wife, the woman he had built a life with, was tangled in the sheets, her bare shoulders illuminated by the bedside lamp. And beside her, just as exposed, was Brandon. His own brother. The world narrowed. Every heartbeat slammed against his ribs like a drum of war. The room felt both suffocatingly small and impossibly vast, the air too thick to breathe. Brandon didn't even have the decency to look guilty. He lay back lazily, arms folded behind his head, his smirk laced with arrogance. Lauren, on the other hand, gasped. But it wasn't a gasp of shame. It was shock, quickly masked by something else, calculation. Ethan's presence had caught her off guard, but only for a moment. He saw it in her face, the way her mind worked to twist the situation, to reshape reality into a story where she wasn't the villain. That familiar, manipulative flicker in her eyes that had always been there, hidden behind a smile. A dozen emotions warred inside him, each fighting for dominance, rage, hurt, humiliation. He had spent years supporting Brandon, bailing him out of one financial disaster after another. And Lauren? She had stood beside him through it all, played the role of devoted wife while betraying him in the most unforgivable way. For a fleeting moment, he thought about tearing the entire room apart. The rage burned so hot it nearly swallowed him. But then, clarity. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The rage turned cold. Controlled. He didn't speak. Didn't demand explanations or shout accusations. Because what was there to say? The truth lay before him, naked and shameless. Without a word, he turned away. Lauren called his name, her voice tight, almost pleading. Brandon muttered something, but Ethan didn't care enough to listen. He walked out, step by step, his heartbeat steady, his hands unclenching. Because this wasn't over. No, this was just the beginning. Ethan woke up the morning after the betrayal with an eerie sense of clarity. The rage that had threatened to consume him the night before had burned down to something colder, something sharper. The Ethan who had walked into his own home expecting love and loyalty had died in that bedroom doorway. The man who emerged was someone else entirely. Lauren had no idea. She believed she had gotten away with it. That Ethan's silence meant surrender. That his lack of an outburst was proof of his weakness, of his devastation. She carried on as if nothing had changed, offering thin, performative kindness, as though placating a child too naive to understand the game he had already lost. Ethan played his part well. He maintained the routine. Kept his tone neutral. Acted distant but never hostile, never giving her a reason to suspect that his mind was already 5 steps ahead. He noticed how she relaxed in his presence, convinced she had outmaneuvered him. He saw the fleeting traces of impatience when she thought he was dragging out the inevitable, as if waiting for him to be the one to leave. She wanted him broken. She wanted him gone. Instead, Ethan stayed. Not out of love, not out of forgiveness, but for something far more dangerous, strategy. 4 weeks, he watched. Listened. Gathered. Lauren had always been careful, but not careful enough. She underestimated him, believing her lies had built an unshakable foundation. But Ethan had learned long ago that even the most convincing illusions crack under pressure. He hired a private investigator, a ruthless one, the kind that turned secrets into weapons. The results came back faster than he expected, a neatly compiled file filled with betrayal in black and white. Receipts from hidden weekend trips, timestamps from hotel bookings, credit card transactions that painted a clear picture of just how long Lauren had been playing him for a fool. Brandon was worse. The little brother Ethan had once protected, once believed was just reckless, not malicious, was drowning in debt. Gambling. A failed business deal that had left him owing money to the wrong people. It wasn't just about the affair. Lauren had been funneling Ethan's money straight into Brandon's hands, keeping him afloat while Ethan unknowingly footed the bill. The numbers were staggering. The lies endless. Ethan felt no anger reading through the reports, only confirmation of what he already knew: these people weren't his family. They were parasites. And parasites didn't get second chances. The house was next. On paper, it was a shared asset, but Lauren had never paid a dime for it. Ethan had purchased it before they married, meaning with the right legal maneuvers, it could be transferred solely into his name. It was easier than he expected. The paperwork was processed in silence, the final signatures secured under the guise of financial restructuring. Lauren didn't even question it. She had no reason to. After all, she believed she was winning. Ethan let her believe it. He watched as she scrolled through her phone late at night, smiling at texts she thought he didn't see. Watched as she dressed a little too carefully on nights she claimed she was meeting a friend. Watched as Brandon's car parked a block away, just far enough to give her the illusion of secrecy. He didn't flinch. Didn't break the act. Because soon, the stage would be his. And when it was time for the final curtain to drop, Lauren would realize far too late that she had never been the one pulling the strings. The invitations had gone out smoothly, the guest list carefully curated. Ethan knew exactly who needed to be there: his parents, a few close friends, and, of course, the 2 stars of the show, Lauren and Brandon. They arrived right on time. Lauren, draped in confidence like armor, her smile effortless, her posture relaxed. She had spent the last few weeks acting as though she had already won, believing Ethan was merely dragging his feet before the inevitable. Brandon followed close behind, dressed sharper than usual, arrogance practically radiating off him. The younger brother who had always been in Ethan's shadow, finally thinking he had gotten the upper hand. Ethan welcomed them as if nothing had changed. His tone was light, his gestures easy. To anyone watching, it would seem like a man making peace with the cracks in his life. Someone mature enough to handle loss with grace. Lauren bought it. So did Brandon. Dinner began without incident. Conversations hummed, laughter echoed, wine flowed. The smell of roasted meat and spices filled the air, the warmth of the home, Ethan's home, wrapping around them all like a false sense of security. Ethan watched as Lauren leaned in to whisper something to Brandon, their smugness sickeningly evident. They believed this dinner was his way of accepting reality, a soft farewell before he disappeared from their lives for good. They had no idea. As plates were cleared and glasses refilled, the moment arrived. Ethan stood, drawing the room's attention effortlessly. There was a slight shift in the air, a subtle pause in conversation, but no one suspected anything yet. He reached for the remote sitting beside his plate and pressed a single button. The lights dimmed. The television across the room flickered to life. At first, the screen displayed harmless nostalgia, family photos from vacations, old birthdays, smiling moments frozen in time. A few chuckles arose from the guests, his mother murmuring something about how young he and Brandon had once looked. Then, the images changed. The laughter died. What started as a pleasant slideshow twisted into something darker, more damning. Screenshots of bank statements, transactions linking Lauren's personal account to Brandon's growing debts. Hotel booking confirmations, timestamps aligning with Ethan's business trips. Images pulled from security footage, Lauren slipping into a parked car late at night, Brandon waiting in the driver's seat. Then, the final nail in the coffin. A still frame from Ethan's own bedroom. The bed unmade. Lauren, bare-shouldered, curled against Brandon's side. Both completely unaware of the small, discreet camera capturing their betrayal. The silence in the room was suffocating. Lauren sat frozen, all color drained from her face, her wine glass trembling slightly in her grip. Brandon's jaw slackened, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. A slow, controlled exhale left Ethan's chest as he let the weight of their shame settle over them. And then, he delivered the final blow. The house, this house, the one Lauren had paraded around in, the one she had assumed would always be hers, was no longer in his name. The paperwork had already been processed. The new owner. None other than Brandon's ex-girlfriend, the woman he had left in the dust when he started sleeping with Lauren. Lauren's shock cracked into something desperate. Brandon's confidence shattered into raw panic. The show was over. Ethan took his seat, the remote set carefully beside his plate, his appetite unbothered by the ruin across the table. He let the silence stretch, let the whispers begin to bubble up from stunned guests. His parents sat stiff, their expressions unreadable. Friends exchanged awkward glances, some avoiding eye contact altogether. Lauren finally moved, setting her glass down too quickly, the sound of it hitting the table unnaturally loud in the stillness. Her hands trembled as she tried to compose herself, her mind undoubtedly scrambling for an explanation, an excuse, a way out. But there was none. Brandon looked ready to bolt, shifting uncomfortably, fingers tapping against his thigh as if resisting the urge to physically run from the moment. Ethan allowed himself the smallest smirk. Because this wasn't just about exposing them. This was about erasing them. And he had just succeeded. The fallout was immediate. Lauren had always prided herself on control. On manipulation. On twisting reality to suit her needs. But no amount of deception could rewrite the truth now. The walls had collapsed around her in real time, and there was no salvaging what had already been reduced to ash. The moment the slideshow ended, the weight of exposed betrayal crushed her. The whispers from family and friends, the condemning stares, the silence of those who once defended her, everything she had built, her carefully curated image, was gone in an instant. Brandon was no better. He had been cocky when he arrived, secure in the belief that his older brother would never truly retaliate. Now, he sat rigid, pale, jaw clenched as realization sank in. The financial support Lauren had been funneling to him had been cut off long before the night's reveal. Ethan had ensured it. The debts Brandon had so carefully buried were about to come clawing back with no escape in sight. The party ended abruptly. No one wanted to linger in the wreckage. Guests left in scattered groups, avoiding eye contact, unwilling to be associated with the disaster that had just unfolded. Ethan watched as his parents hesitated, torn between disappointment and disgust. They had always made excuses for Brandon, always tried to keep the peace between them, but this? This was something even they couldn't ignore. Lauren tried to regain composure, hands shaking as she smoothed the fabric of her dress, but it was useless. There was no recovering from this. No turning it around. Brandon, for all his bravado, avoided looking at Ethan entirely. His usual smirk was nowhere to be found. His fingers tapped nervously against the table, legs bouncing slightly under the weight of his own unraveling. And then, it was just the three of them. Ethan, Lauren, and Brandon. The house, once shared, now belonged to neither of them. The locks would be changed by morning. Their things, what little Ethan had allowed them to keep, were already packed. Lauren had assumed she would win. That she would come out on top. But the reality was far more brutal. She had no home. No savings. No way to twist the narrative into one where she was the victim. Ethan had legally separated every asset, ensuring she would walk away with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. Brandon had even less. The safety net he had relied on for years had been yanked away. The creditors he had ignored would come knocking, and there would be no one left to protect him. No brother to bail him out. No money to fall back on. Just an empty house and a life in freefall. Ethan felt nothing as he walked past them. No guilt. No regret. Not even satisfaction. Just finality. The weight of it all lifted as he stepped outside, the night air cool against his skin. The last few months had been consumed by the slow, methodical dismantling of a lie. Now, there was nothing left to dismantle. For the first time in years, he was free. His car was already packed. His new home, a place untouched by their betrayal, waited on the other side of the city. He didn't need much. Just space. Peace. A life that was his alone. Behind him, the house stood still and silent, its doors closing on the past for good. Ethan exhaled. Then, without a single glance back, he drove away.